How are you, man?
I'm good. Do I have to start adding Media Maven, or do you need to start adding Media Maven to your signature, huh?
You know, try and do it all. I figured like part of what my thought with these was well, you know this, right? Like when I talk, a lot of times when I'm talking to parents or kids even, um, yeah, I think I feel like they're getting to hear directly from prep coaches a little bit about how this process works. Like that part has been is for whatever reason doesn't happen nearly as much as it should, right? And so
Mhm.
much of this now is like I think just trying to refute some of the misinformation a little bit that's out there around like how this process actually works, right? Like and trying to help people understand it. So
So you get like, I bet you if you put the whole compilation together, you could find like, coach saying one thing, coach saying completely other, and in some ways it's good, right? They have to learn how to like amalgamate all that and kind of synthesize it and let it match what's like important to their family. But yeah, hopefully on the high line stuff, we're all somewhat, you know, in concert.
yeah, and this is so you know, like we just keep talking like this, like, but that, like, no, I think the biggest thing I always try and tell families is there's this huge misconception that this like is going to work like college hockey, right? That like you as prep school coaches are going to go out and watch 75 games, target five guys for the five openings you have, offer them a spot on your team and get your guys. And for most people, understanding like it doesn't work like that at all. And trying to help them understand that is yeah, I think in part why I've like tried to start to do some of these conversations. But
That's
also I think just to help people understand, I think now with so many different paths too, like obviously I'm partial, right? Like why boarding schools is still like I think a great option.
sure, no doubt. Yeah.
What year will this be at Hill coming up?
Yeah, and so are we kind of starting now,
We're
by the way?
into it, yeah.
We're into it. I love it. This is coming up. I will start year 19 at the Hill School. So just finished 18. It's been and always in the admission office. So
Yeah.
I haven't not this office per se. I've been in this building though for all my time here.
So for you, you graduated probably like right around the same time I left Taft, right? Was it like 97, 98?
Yeah,
Played, went to Harvard, played pro for a decade roughly.
I wish 6 years, but we can round up if you
Yeah,
want.
we can
That
round
makes it
up.
closer to 10.
We'll throw it
So
in, but
we
played in the NHL, which not, I mean, very few people can say. Um,
yeah.
when you were done playing, was it all, did you always think you were going to go back to prep school or did you think about something else?
Uh, so like I probably knew even when I was here. I was at Hill for 2 years. I came as a reclass junior, and I was from this area, so I lived, yeah, I don't know, whatever, 25 minutes away. Growing up, I was a Minuteman, a junior flyer, and I was part of clubs and organizations that existed before those existed.
Right.
So I grew up here. In fact, my first ever organized ice hockey when I was 5 years old in this area was here at the Hill School, our old outdoor rink. I was a Pottstown Penguin. So in some ways, it almost like kind of seemed fated that I was going
Right.
to end up here. Came for 2 years as a student. Absolutely loved my time. Peaked and poked around a little bit in New England, but I think I was a bit of a homebody and was sort of just, kind of more apt to stay close to home, though we like didn't have an organized way that the process worked. But came here, I boarded both of my years, even though like kids who live in the same town as me nowadays would do like a day student and then boarding. I boarded both my years and I loved it. Like it absolutely like changed who I am, like for the better, made me more confident, made me more sure of myself. I found adults who like loved me and wanted to support me who weren't my mom and dad, right? All those
Yeah.
kind of life-changing things that unfortunately like we can't write that in catalogs or put it on websites, but like so those
Right.
are the reasons of why boarding. I knew then that I wanted to end up here. And I kind of always thought maybe as I got into college and realized that pro hockey was going to be a real thing, like I realized, okay, maybe I'll do something after hockey and then I'll go back to Hill and like ride off into the sunset, right? Like kind of, the
Right.
great aspects of a boarding school life that allow for that. But when I finished playing, I was 28 years old, I think. I just come off my second year in the East Coast League, playing in Reading, which was close to home, was 25, 30 minutes away. I was one of the rare cases in the coast where I lived in a house that I owned and then drove out. I didn't live in team provided housing. My wife
Nice.
had a great teaching gig as a state employee, so good benefits, like it all worked out. But I got to the end of my second year and I just knew that it, like, I just, like, I don't know, like it just wasn't for me. Like I can kind of remember the day in practice. And so I knew, and I played that season out. We didn't make playoffs, lost like one of those last game of regular season
Yep.
heartbreak type deals. And then like I woke up and I was like, okay, like what's next? I sort of foolishly, and I had one kid. My oldest was, I think he was like one at the time. I had another on the way. So like, real life like was creeping in, and you certainly don't
Right.
get rich minors. Um, I was like, okay, what am I going to do here? And I laugh at myself now, but I put my resume together. I sat down in a little office in my house, and I kind of tried to network a little bit to go and like, well, let me go like try New York and Wall Street, and let me just see what industry is out there. It's kind of dumb now that I look back on it, but I went for some interviews, and like I was 28 years old. I had no job experience. I
Yep.
had cool other experience, right? Like
Yeah.
pro sports brings a ton of value. It was great, but like I don't know how to do anything.
Right.
And so the feedback that I got, and I was a little bit in the like maybe HR headhunting, kind of that world. I wasn't trying to like go sell insurance or like do iBanking. I don't know math for nothing, even though I do financial
Right.
aid now. Um, but like the feedback I got was, hey, great, good, but we need you to come in on the ground floor. And it wasn't like I was expecting a red carpet to be rolled out, but I was a dad and I was a husband, and I
Yeah.
want those things were important to me. And like I wasn't a 22-year-old coming out of college that could go and burn 100-hour weeks, just sleeping on the floor in the office and
Yeah.
making it that way. I needed the back end of it. So kind of quickly I turned my attention, not like trying to work at Hill, but I leaned into the Hill network at that time. And the head of school at that time, David Daugherty, was still head, who had been there when I was a student, was still at the school. And I just had a great relationship with him. I was able to like meet once a summer for like, meet a lunch and that sort of thing. That we came to our
Yep.
wedding, and a real close relationship, one of those cool boarding school stories. And I wasn't asking David to roll the red carpet out for me either, but he set me up in my first interview here at Hill. He set me up with at the time like a gift job, right? Like a fundraising deal, which for somebody who kind of doesn't know anything but knows the story of the school kind of made some
Right.
sense.
Can sell it a
You
little
know,
bit. Yeah.
yeah, you don't need business acumen to do that. But so like I remember going to the interview with the guy, and I think I was a really bad interview. I just think it was like, and he totally passed on me. Like it was one of those weird points where I didn't even know what to think going in. Like I was so comfortable with Hill. I don't think I like understood the job as it was, and like I can only imagine how I came off. I don't think like that I had expectations. I probably just wasn't ready. Like I was ready to do anything basically, but I wasn't sure of what I wanted to do. So that guy passes on me. And then later in the summer, Tom Eccleston, who is still my boss to the day and had coached me in my senior year at Hill,
Yep.
came back to take the enrollment job here. And it was like a July 1 start gig. They lost a half timer from the office, he's a guy named Justin Sorrenzia, who would go on
Okay.
to coach at St. George's a little bit. He's back here at Episcopal, awesome guy. He went from a half admission, half teaching to full teaching. And so what it opened up was this kind of like half job in the admission office. And, here I am floating around, David, I know Tom, and then Matt Mulhern, another great boarding school name, Ryan Mulhern, older brother at
Yep.
St. George's. Matt, who had a great career at Canterbury, played at BC, worked at Pomfret, worked at Groton, and then was here at
Yep.
Hill. He and I knew each other from the sort of days we played against each other in college. So it was just one of those like kind of perfect circles where I needed a job, right? Like I couldn't,
Yeah.
like I had, like it was, it's July, and I'm not going to play pro hockey the coming fall. And it sort of fell together. I joked, and Tom literally this morning was busting my chops. Like I didn't interview. I don't think I even gave him a resume.
Yep.
It was just sort of like admissions is really the story of a school, the ability to relate. They needed somebody. Justin Sorenzi, who I still stay in touch with, he said, "Yeah, Chris, they had to hire you as a full time person to replace him
Like
me
me,
as
yeah,
a
part
half
time.
time person." And again, it was just one of those deals, and so yeah, I fell into this career that I now have, I think, made of it. It's a role that I really enjoy at Hill, a place I always knew I wanted to be. I just probably got here a little earlier than I thought.
Mine was like same thing. When I left college, I did a very brief stint in that corporate world, which I was pretty quickly like I didn't think was for me. And then
Yeah,
got into school, but got into boarding school same way. Like Mike Mayer, who was my hockey coach
yeah,
at
yeah,
Taft, was just named the head of school at Berkshire. I was newly married and got hired with the like, hey, we don't know what the job is, right? Like, but come
yeah,
here and then like we'll figure it out. And like, yeah, I think that too is I always tell people like the interesting thing to me about boarding schools, even in hiring, right, is that like when you talk about those relationships of people,
yep,
like I think schools that do it really well do it with like we're going to hire really great people who we think are going to be great with kids, and then we will find the right roles for them when they're once we've got them here, right? Like it
yeah.
is interesting.
It's such an intricate puzzle, right? And as the temperature in the boarding school enrollment world and facing the value proposition with families, like I do think there's like a romantic side to it where it's like, yeah, just find great people and turn Chris Bala into a chemistry teacher, right?
Right,
Like no, like maybe that's a bit of a leap,
right.
but because you have to then still bring acumen and expertise and let families feel like they're getting so and that those two tensions are difficult even within the coaching world in athletics, right? Finding great coaches who fit the culture of school or find people who can do the school job, the day job, so to speak, and be great coaches. That's something that faces everybody till now. But it's amazing how many times it works out, kind of like in our cases where you back into something a little bit. And ultimately, I think it comes down to you got to love it. I think kids and schools in general, like they got kind of good BS meters, and
Yep.
if you try to fake it, they kind of quickly tune you out. It's not that they expect you to have every answer, but if they don't think you care about them, or if they don't think you care about the role, you're done. Like it's not going to work, especially in a smaller school like Hill, to say nothing of a place even smaller than us like Berkshire. But that kind of finding that combination, it's rare and challenging. But man, when it works,
Well,
like for me,
and
it, it's
that
it's been amazing.
ethos too, though, I think is so. I know this, and I when I try and explain to families, like, is I think at the core of like how schools make their decisions around everyone they want to have in their communities, like and admissions. Like I know, we've talked about a lot of kids over the last couple of years, but like I know when like I'm calling you beyond even like talking to me about whether or not that he's a good hockey player or even like he's admissible, that question of like, hey, is he a good kid, like tell me about him, like who is this kid before. Okay, great, now we'll talk about whether or not maybe he might be admissible, and then is he going to be a hockey player here, right? Like
Yeah,
um
yeah,
so like that ethos to me is so prevalent through everything.
exactly, no doubt.
Like yeah. um So you started when you got there, you started coaching right away? Were you working with the hockey team right when you got there?
I did not actually. I
Yeah.
asked the school for a year off. I'd come
Yeah.
out of 6 years pro, 4 years college, and then playing since I was three. So like at that point, I'm 20, yeah, I don't know, 25 years, whatever it is. Like it has just been hockey straight, and I just asked for a year off in my first year, my first ever boarding school coaching responsibility in the fall of my first year at Hill. I was a water polo timer.
Nice.
And man, oh man, talk about something that was way more stressful than I thought. The game is really cool. Water polo, to watch it is neat. It's physical. They're kind of beating on each other. Our teams at Hill have traditionally been very good. So it was like
Yeah.
entertaining to watch. It was skillful. But the clock element, where it was located, was literally like kind of right in the middle of the stands. And there are two clocks. It's one of these like clock and score clock or a shot clock, and like which one starts and which one goes. And
Yeah.
I was like, I thought I was in for just pushing a button and kind of cruising for the fall, and I had like this kind of like, kind of wake up call of like, I had to be on the ball. But water polo timing was my first one. And then I coached JV baseball in the spring of that first year. So those were my 2 seasons of responsibility. I'd
Yeah.
grown up playing baseball. The town that I'm from, Phoenixville, is very traditional, kind of, not maybe not nowadays as much, but very strong baseball background. I played all the way through my junior year at public high school. I had my one of my athletic regrets, probably my most, is I did not play baseball when I came to Hill. I
Yeah.
made the dumb decision that I was a hockey player, and I try to fight that with every kid I talk to since. But I didn't play here. But I coached some JV baseball, and then in my second year, Matt Mulhern, who worked in admissions, so I was working with him every day, friends with him. They lost this guy from their staff, and it was sort of made sense for me to jump in year two. And I served as Matt's assistant with Justin Sorrenzia. The three of us coached together for, I want to say it was 6 or 7 years. And then Matt left Hill to take the enrollment job at Canterbury.
Canterbury.
And
Yeah.
I assumed, I stepped into both the head coach role and then also Matt's primary job here as a financial aid guy. I took on both those roles when he left. And I want to say that's maybe around 2012-ish, 13-ish, 11-ish, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Now you and Matt cross over a little bit, like in the admissions world, right? Because
Yeah,
he's
differently.
still over at Lawrenceville, right?
He is, yeah. He's made his way back. His wife, and it's funny. Like we raised our kids. He's got 4 boys. My 2 boys, when they're all like in the same age. In fact, his second and my oldest were captains of the golf teams. This year, travel with Molly on the road. It's just neat. Like that's one of those boarding school stories. But I see him quite a bit. Although that is our arch rival school. So
Right.
I hope some way he's like a little torn, that he's got a little bit of
Yeah.
Hill left in him. But yeah, somebody who really like helped me just like professionally in this office. He had played pro and had played college, and knew that transition. And, he started his family just before we started ours. So it was like kind of in a way watching a little bit and seeing how they go through it. It was really, really helpful to have somebody who just understood it, right? Because you come out of the world that I did, it was such a different piece, but the idea of teamwork and communication and hard work, all of those things translate, but it was just different coming out of that into this. And he was super helpful for sure.
So what, and I'll tell you a little bit of mine afterwards, but like for you, what have you seen like the biggest changes in? I mean, I won't even get into when like you and I were playing prep hockey because that's now like talking about is totally irrelevant. But
Yeah.
from when you first started coaching, so I started coaching my first year coaching I coached at Brunswick in '04 and then Berkshire in '05.
Okay.
Um, for you, like, what have you seen the biggest changes in like the prep hockey, the landscape, all of it related to prep hockey? Like, how different is it now?
Yeah. Gosh, great question. And I've got these like 2 iterations, right? I was head coach. I
Right,
stepped back into JV for a couple of years. Now I'm back in head coaching again. A couple of things. Like I like the players are so much better, right? And
right.
this isn't probably just prep hockey. This goes, beyond, right? The pool of players is so much more talented. There are probably more of them too, statistically, I would
Yep.
guess. And the reason I start there is I think that increase in supply of players has ratcheted up the anxiety level of players and families in charting out the path to what they feel and hope is next, right? And for some families, it's not even what's next. They're thinking about like what's like 3 steps next. But this
Yes.
idea, and I don't know what it is about our sport, and perhaps it's there in others too, where there's this like pressure in our world to make it, and it's and it probably has always been there. I think from our time, gosh, internet, right? Like you didn't know what
Right. Yep.
Johnny from Minnesota or Stevie from St. Louis, those guys didn't actually
You
exist.
heard stories, right? Like
Yeah,
those
you're
were
like, oh, who is this? It's like William
right,
Wallace, Braveheart. Like, who is this guy? Like,
right.
wait a second, he just has 2 skates on and he plays and he's this similar as me. But so but again, I think it's that it probably is and though the internet in 2007 and the way it was used, versus now. So the connectivity, the talent, which is great. And there are more options available. There are more routes, leagues, right? Like there are more, but I don't think it's paced with the supply. So it's created this pinch point that's got a combination of anxiety both on a player's point, and then I think maybe in our sport because of the financial aspect, the investment that a family now knows they're making up front, the leverage point where families are more into it, right? If you're just taking your kid to a local field and you make a lower level investment, there
For
maybe
sure.
isn't as much pressure, both time and financial. Then that like gets into the emotional bit of like, how do I get my kid there? So all of that has it's changed for sure. There are nuances within the prep world that I maybe we'll get on, later in
Yeah.
terms of enrollment pressures and this and that. But
Yeah,
the
yeah,
hockey
yeah.
specific world, more routes, more commodification, more people, sort of trying to say, well, take my path because I'm going to get you from A to B to C. And I can probably say this more personally because I did play the levels I did, and it gives me a little bit. It makes it easier for me to say this, but man, if you're good, you're good. And
Right.
this idea that the path makes the player, I don't fully agree with philosophically. Others might disagree, and that's okay. I'd engage that conversation, but those are things that come to mind when we talk about what's
Yeah.
changed. Yeah.
I also think too, when you and I were playing, but even when I first started coaching, prep hockey, in some ways, yes, more specifically to hockey, was it, as you said, if you were good enough, it was going to create immediate opportunities, right? Like you were,
Oh, sure.
we both went right from prep school to play Division I
Yeah.
college hockey. And when I first started coaching, we had a few guys who did that. So to
Yep.
me, I think one of the bigger changes in trying to help families understand this is that I think just purely on the hockey piece,
Yep.
it is now thinking about it as much more of a developmental step in
Oh, yeah.
your process that is going to hopefully help to create some of those college opportunities from a hockey standpoint down the road. But to me, I also think that the advantage of it is like there is no other, regardless of the other option, there is no other developmental step that offers the same development opportunities outside of the rink, like developing you as a person.
Oh, no doubt. And it's funny, you use that word development. I think that in some ways it's become like a bit of a dirty word. Everybody
Right,
uses it, right? Like best developmental league, best development is. To me, if I'm working with a family, one of the first things I'm trying to get them to understand is that we are not just developing little Billy as a hockey player.
right,
We are developing Billy as a human, and it's we care in some ways in the boarding school world, I'm speaking slightly broadly. There's probably some schools that maybe don't agree, and that's okay. And models are different, but like we probably care about more who your kid is in 15 years than we do in 5 years. And
yep,
and to me, it's hard because families are then looking at the prep route and the emotional investment of potentially having your kid away, the financial investment again, for sure. There's so much that goes into it. And I understand why they think about this idea of, well, if I miss point A, I can't get to B or C or D. But to me, it's like because it's not the next step anymore, right? It's not from prep to college.
right,
There's so much more out there. It's sort of like, you know, take care of what's important. And every family will say, education is the most important thing until it's not, right? Then you see
right,
kids make decisions and they choose routes and that are clearly not, families that are not, maybe they say one thing and then they do the other because that's just how life works. It's imperfect. But like a kid can really get a great sort of personal, developed outside, pushed in positive environments with adults in their life who care and want to support them, and then they can get ready, at least in the hockey world specific, then they can get ready to really take what is probably closer to what's going to make them into that college hockey player, that 1 or 2 or 3 years of junior that they have ahead of them. Those are the things that are like going to make them ready for that next step after. And it's that's probably what I talk to more families than not about, that are interested in the hockey piece, is like, take your time, patience. They want to be told where they're going to get to and where we can get you to. And I'm like, I don't ever want to take credit for a kid getting somewhere. Like I
right,
just play a part in their path, right? For a 4 year window, maybe a 2 year window, maybe we're going to try to help that kid be better while they're here. I guarantee though, they'll be a better person and more fully experienced. They'll meet more people. They'll have that wider kind of just time on in a community that they can be a part of, and then be ready for that next step. But yeah,
I we
that
could
change is crazy.
Yeah, and we could talk a little bit, and I'd be curious about how this happens at Hill, but I talked to Tim Jonkis about this the other day, a little bit more about like, for me, I think one of the huge advantages of it too is this idea that like, I do feel like, and I see this with my own kids, but it's the nature of this specialization in the world, right? Like
Yeah.
that kids get on this path to like, okay, this is it, like you said, and then this is the next thing I'm supposed to do, and this is it, and this is all I've been doing. What I love about boarding schools is, and I think again, speaking specifically to hockey, it's the opportunity to go to a place like Hill, play hockey at a really high level, and I think play a lot of hockey. You have an opportunity to play a lot, but also be forced, required, encouraged to do some other things, with the advantage of that being that if those opportunities for you, if you're good enough, as you said, like, okay, you're good enough, like you're going to go,
Yeah.
you now can make the choice of like, I'm doing this because I love it. I've, I've,
Hmm.
I've had the opportunity to try some other things, and I know this is what I love
Yep.
versus why, I mean, I don't know. I've never done anything else. So like, this is what I feel like this is what I
Yeah.
kind of got it. Like, as you said, coming out where you're like, when you were a professional hockey player and you hit that road when you were done retired, I was like, okay, what else
Yeah.
can I do? I
Yeah.
feel like without prep schools, there are kids reaching that point at now 15, where I'm going to the rink and I'm going to play this out because like I don't this is I also think with teenagers there's so much of that, how that becomes their identity, right? And they're wrapped
Cool.
up in this, if I'm not a hockey player, what am I? And I think
Yeah.
boarding schools allowing kids not to do that, right? Like is
Yeah,
huge.
when you say that, I think of a couple things. The word countercultural, becomes very much to top of mind, and we are intentional about that in our community. That we want and need kids to do different things without being blind to the idea that in our world, families are coming out of oftentimes, and not even just in our sport and others. There's a bit of a specialization desire, and we're trying
For
to
sure.
like almost sometimes tell families, oh, we'll kind of meet you where we are, but you got to get a little uncomfortable with us. You got to do some other things. And that's one of the things I like about Hill is that it has kept that, and it's challenging, no doubt,
Yeah.
because the way that the prep hockey market has moved and is moving is a slippery slope towards the club, kind of prep hybrid. To say nothing of by definition is that a bad thing. It's just it's going to create some shifts, but that point you made about defining kids. I spoke at our banquet this year. So I coached for a long time. I stepped away under my own volition for 3 years. I coached the JV team at Hill, which is was a great pace personally and professionally. Allowed me to lean in more in this office, and it didn't have that desire. And I was also not doing year end banquets. And I come back this year and I do year one. And my message this past banquet to the players in the room, and specifically to our seniors who were graduating, we had a large class, we had 11 or 12 kids in it, is I said that very thing. I said, don't let your performance as a hockey player and your achievement as a hockey player then define you as a person. And this is one of those other things on the backside of my career. I've done this job for 18 years. I played pro hockey for 6. Okay, I played NHL hockey for 6 games, so even a much
Hey,
smaller bit. So to say that Chris Bala was a hockey player is accurate, but Chris Bala is something different.
yes.
I think the hard emotional part in our sport is that kids attach their identity to the playing, and that
Yep.
and it's cool, right? Yeah, wear your heart on your sleeve, and hockey is life, all those bumper stickers that you had growing up, that's cool and all, I get it. But like there also becomes a point at which what you do professionally and for a passion is one thing, but who you are as a person is another. I think boarding schools help fight that and help delay that urge, and show kids they can be lots of different things. You don't have to be just one, and you can be darn good at them. You can play at the next level, having been a multi-sport athlete, having sung in a choir, having taken photography classes. You can do all those things and not just box checking. You can actually be serious about them and still make it. I love that about boarding school. I've always wanted to be a part of certainly our program here, that kids feel empowered to be a part of that. And how many times do club hockey families I'm sure, talk to each other in hotels or rinks, or they come to talk to us and say, oh my God, it's too much. This club world
Right.
is too much. And we can be a bit of a Serenity Now moment because we're not doing what tier one hockey certainly does, and now probably tier two, where they're putting that 13th month's expectation on families,
Right.
right? Like, yeah, we want Billy to be a multi-sport athlete, but we're going to have 3 practices a week. We're
Right. As
going to
long as he
travel
doesn't miss
6
anything we're
weekends.
doing.
Then we got all the pre-scout evals, and then with the pre-scout evals, and then we want you to come out for the summer. And if meanwhile the kids who skip all that stuff are the really good ones, because guess what? They're really good. So it's this
Yep.
kind of weird, world that we try to be a little bit of a reprieve, a little bit of but now there's pressure creeping in here too. So I think schools have to stick to what's important, decide what your values and kind of your mission, as an institution. And then I've always said I want hockey to be a part of that Hill experience. I want the hockey program to be in concert with the Hill mission and the Hill experience. And then if we're doing that, I think we're serving families and kids really well.
And I think you guys, there, as you know, right, there are lots of schools that do that, I think, really well. I speaking specifically to Hill, just because we obviously we went through the admission cycle with a number of kids. Um,
Yeah.
I'll honestly say, so all of the kids that I have who are chose to go to Hill this year,
Mm.
all of them had, I want to be sure I'm saying, like, yeah, all of them had multiple acceptances to other schools. And I think what was really interesting to me about their decision was, so hockey, obviously these were all boys hockey players who were really excited, and it's a huge part of who they are, right? Like I think if I asked any of those kids, as you said, they would say they're hockey players.
Yep.
Um, for their families, I will say every one of them, when I we got down to the reason, well, okay, where are you going to go? The
Mm.
reason all of them chose Hill was not for hockey, right? Like I
Yeah.
think they all got to the point of like, okay, I recognize that the hockey opportunity at Hill is on par or maybe better than the
Or
other
not,
options
right?
I
And I'm
have.
comfortable saying that too, right? That's fine. Yeah.
Right. But none of them, and I think specifically about some of these families where for one of them it was a really specific academic program that Hill offers
Yep.
that no one else does, or that sense of community or those things. And so it is interesting to me that like I think you talk about how you're trying to do that, and I know from an admission standpoint too how hard it is to be able to message that, but like there's an effectiveness in how you're doing it, and I say that just because like the kids I have who are going there are all great kids who had great options. And interestingly enough for them, I think if honestly, if I would have sat with any of those kids at this time of the year or even September or December
Yeah.
and asked them like, well, what's the most important thing to you? How are you going to choose? They would have
Yep.
told me hockey, right? Like
Of
the
course.
kid, the
Yep.
parents might not have, but the kid would have.
Yeah.
Um, Ultimately, I think at the end, for all of those, the students, not just the parents, the reason they chose Hill was either knowing or at least getting a sense of and a feeling that there were going to be these other opportunities there that might not exist for them elsewhere.
Yeah.
Like,
No, and I appreciate you saying that, brother. Uh it's important to us. It's important to me. Again, my own personal experience here and my personal connection drives a lot of how I try to represent this school every single day in this office, my day job, right? The admission work that I do is trying to show Hill off in the best light possible, but professionally and into the hockey world, we can't be everything to everybody. And I think it's really important that and maybe we're fortunate at Hill because we have the applicant base where we can be selective to an
selective,
extent of
yeah.
saying, okay, we're going to match certain kids, and maybe some of the cooler ones are the. I'm thinking back to alumni this weekend, this past spring, where a class of boys from 5 years came through, and one of them in particular was like kind of totally off the beaten path, like a kid who like wouldn't have thought Hill was going to be the place, and even in his time here, it took him time to really buy in, and he eventually gets there and he turns the corner of like, oh my gosh, what a great experience. Those types of stories are amazing and awesome. We just want to find that match and not, I can say anything I want to a kid in the admission process or in the recruiting process, but if that doesn't turn into reality when they get here, that's not fair. And I say it to families because I don't get paid to win or lose hockey games at the Hill School. I'm pretty sure I have pretty good job security, as many prep coaches do, if you're staying mission aligned, right? If you're finding out what's important, and if you give families great experiences, but to make it transactional where it's just about come to a school to get to a particular league and to get to a particular level, I don't know. I just, that to me is it's too much of a mercenary, and frankly, like it's like too important. Like they make movies about high school, right? Our head of school said that the other day. It's like a critical time of life. Like why would you want to try to jam something in because it's what everybody else does, or it's, I want families to choose Hill not because of me and not because of hockey all the time. There's like way better reasons to choose this school, but for kids who are passionate about our program and others like it, you can still have a wonderful athletic experience here and play at the next level. I always say Hill won't be the reason you don't get to the next level.
Right.
Like I hate to say it, right? Like it's just not like there's going to be
Yeah,
other reasons.
there's no excuse. If you're good
Like
enough, like
it's not. I would say that about most boarding schools. To be honest, there's
right.
not a boarding school out there that's probably going to advantage you to one particular spot or disadvantage you. Not every kid wants our rigor or wants the coat and tie or wants the like. That's fine. Like, oh, that's okay. Go find another school. I want kids to be happy in boarding school. I don't need it to be at Hill all the time because again, we have a particular mix and some kids aren't drawn to it. And I don't want to try to say, well, I know you don't like dress code. We don't have it very much. And the kid
Right.
gets it.
Right.
We're in dress code 85% of the time. Kid, this coach lied to me. Like that's dumb. That's unprofessional, and it doesn't honor the like commitment that families make to come to boarding school, where you want their kid to be like really happy. That's like first and foremost.
Well, and I too, I always tell my families this, like that idea of when I'm advocating on behalf of a student and having also done it on the coach's side, like I can't call any coach, and I'll talk about you specifically in this, but like I can't call any coach and say, hey, I've got this kid here, and I think you should take him because he's going to help you win 3 or 4 more hockey games next year, right? Like it's
Yeah,
ultimately, when I was a director of admission, but also like coaches coming in and being able to say like, hey, here's the profile of this young man, and like I think he can benefit here academically. I think these are the things he can do from an athletic standpoint. He can develop. I talked a lot about this last time with Tim Jonkis too. Like you add some of those things up, and here's some of the potential outcomes he might have, which ultimately might benefit us as a school, right? But I even, talking about you because you're in not totally unique, but a little bit of a different situation. Like when I'm talking to families about you or Hill, like I often do tell them, hey, just so totally upfront here, like I know Chris is the head hockey coach and he works in admissions. He cannot get your son into school because he's a hockey player, right? Like
no,
that's not how this is good. Like
yeah,
because you and I have talked about that. Like, hey, I've had kids who you're like, I
yeah.
love them and I cannot get them through our admissions
I
process
don't
because like
I
it's
don't
just
have a
not how it's
pebble.
going to
I,
work.
I don't have a pebble in there. I don't, we don't, and that's there's that behind the scenes piece where I think when a family can work with somebody like you who has real tried and true experience, right? Because like there's like an industry of
Right,
other
for sure.
Brad DiArco consultant types, and we don't work with all of them. We don't want to. We don't need to. This idea though of understanding what it actually is like for a school making decisions, that is hugely beneficial. It would be similar to like a kid going to a K through 8 school and coming through with a middle school head who's really going to help us learn, and we're going to interface with them, and like those things are important for kids, that they've got people on their side, especially families, and there are a predominant number out there from the hockey world who come into our world green, who don't know a lot about it. And frankly, they hear down the whisper lane that, okay, well, little Stevie 2 years ago from our organization went to this school. And,
Right.
it's like, okay, great. That doesn't mean really much of anything. Those conversations are so valuable. But yeah, it's always admission decisions first. And like at school, if anything, I probably double, triple screen myself. Like I actually don't like to interview a lot of kids who come through because I'm likely going to Zoom with them or call, and talk to them beforehand. So when they're in our building, I want somebody else on our team to get to know that kid, so it doesn't feel like the greasy hockey coach sitting in
Right.
committee saying, "Hey, we need this kid." I want it to be a fit. Again, it's really really important.
Yeah, I also think too, I'm just thinking again about my group of kids. Like, I think you guys have done obviously as a school in part because of your size, and I think obviously the reputation and academic standards of Hill, like a really diverse group of students. But even just thinking about the kids I'm thinking about who are going,
Mhm.
the hockey players I've had there, right? I've had a kid boy from Chicago, New York, North Carolina, Florida, and Texas
Texas, yep,
all in the last 2 years, right? I'm
yeah.
hoping if one of them watches this and I missed that, I'm sorry, but like at least
I think you
that's
got it.
yeah, right?
The
Like
good
so
thing is
clearly
it's
you
hard
guys
for
are
us to.
drawing from really even from a hockey standpoint, some non-traditional markets, which I think is really interesting too.
It's a good thing maybe that list is hard to keep track of, right?
Yeah,
It's a benefit in a way, but and that goes to the side of Hill. We are who we are. We I think we have a strong reputation in the boarding school world. We offer kids a great experience, though to the geographic disbursement sometimes because we're not in New England, right? I always say we're a New England boarding school that just happens to be located outside of Philadelphia, right? If you
yeah,
pick this campus up and you put it in them anywhere basically north of the Tappan Zee Bridge, you'd be like, okay, yep, that fits. And hey, actually, that's an amazing program. Like we can punch up the group of schools, the 10 school group that we relate with academically and program wise. Those are the names of the names, but we're off the beaten path. And I think a lot of times families aren't familiar with us because even in the Mid Atlantic, the boarding school connotation still has this interesting little like you get sent away.
sent away.
Boarding
Yeah,
school is it's bad kids. It's got this and it's crazy. Us Blair, Lawrenceville, Mercersburg, Petty, St. Andrews. Again,
shady side out there. Yeah,
Shady side. Yeah, you go Shady side, Wyoming, Sam.
the Wyoming
Um,
Stem.
could places that we have to. We almost can be like a surprise. Like the best thing I can hear is a family come in and say, "Yeah, gosh, I don't even know about you guys, but man, this place is unbelievable." It's funny when you get further away from Hill into some maybe those non-traditional markets you talked about. Sometimes those families don't know the difference. I remember
Right.
one of my first few years was on a recruiting road, and Matt Herr, Matt
Oh
Herr,
yeah.
going back and coached at Kent and heck of a player in his own right. Crossed over with him playing a little bit pro. So when I got coaching, I ran into him a little bit, and he talked about he really I think turned Kent's program around quite a
For
bit. He talked
sure.
about grabbing a little bit further distance, can help because they don't, at that point for him, his pool is deeper and who he's competing with in Connecticut. But you don't know Kent from Gunnery, from Frederick Gunn now, but from Choate, from anybody else. There is that idea that distance can help mitigate. That's a strategy, right? Like as a coach, don't do a ton of recruiting in New England because that family might have to drive by 40 other schools to get
Yep.
to us. And the mom and dad, parents and family, they're saying, geez, why wouldn't we take this maybe closer option that gives us more access? And rightly so. I think geography drives a lot more of a family's decision than they might be willing to admit. But gosh, when we get kids from all over the place, that matches like that's the mission of Hill. We want kids, I think right now, or maybe 30 states, 30 countries, something like that. Really awesome community. Again, our team in the best of years is going to mirror that as best we can. We want that same sort of feel. That's intentional on our part.
For me, when I'm talking to families, and I think and this isn't true of Hill, right? I think the biggest thing I've learned in doing what I do now is like if I talk to hockey families, some of them think they know prep school hockey, and when you say that, they can name four schools. And when you're like, well, there's like 60, they're like, well, really? And so then as I start to introduce not just Hill, but like different schools even in New England they've never heard of. But one of the things I've noticed when I bring up Hill, the two questions I will get are, yeah, first of all, like, okay, geographically or wherever it is, like I'm not sure. I will say inevitably every one of those families once they step foot on that campus and full disclosure, right? Like I toured with my son this year, right? Like it's shockingly nice and like that instantly goes away. The other thing though that I do spend some time talking to them about, which I think would be interesting for like from your perspective, is um because of the academic reputation of Hill, right? And being a part of the 10 schools. The two things I will get from families is like, okay, one, we'd have to decide about the location, but two, like, can he, could he get in there? Like, can he actually, right? And I think what I've learned over the years of doing this is as selective as Hill is, and with the academic reputation it has. Um, yeah, I don't want to like I think all, boarding schools do a great job, and schools do admissions differently at every place. Like I do think, and I know this based on the profile of some of the kids I've sent you, right? Like there is a very, for lack of a better term, holistic approach in terms of like how you all are making decisions, and not just necessarily like, well, hey, like it's got to be a 90th percentile tester, right? Like, and
Yeah.
and that. But I do think the initial reputation of the school sometimes is that, like,
Yep. Yeah.
can you get in?
And even more than that, we also we are a coat and tie school, and man, if you just look at pictures, geez, do we look like we could be a pretentious, stuffy, like stuck
Right,
up, snobby boarding school? And so I think we try to fight both. We want to use both in a way. Certainly, the 10 school piece and the academic rigor, those are important. But we obviously don't want that to, as you're saying, sort of push or scare families. We don't have, and I said it to a family this morning who was visiting, like, we don't have 530 robot wizard perfect straight A children on this campus. And in fact, we don't want that. That is not the type of community we're trying to build. We must have kids who are all around sort of involved. You can be a little bit more passionate about one than the other, but you can't be like, you can't even be an academic specialist here.
right,
if you bring straight A's and perfect testing, literally perfect, and think like, yeah, I'm gonna get in that school. It doesn't mean we refuse plenty of kids who have that profile, because we are looking for fit, right? What would happen in this room when I'm interviewing a kid is almost maybe more important, because if I'm really being honest, and I'm willing to say this too, is like, I think grade inflation is pretty real out there.
for sure.
Like lots of kids who apply to Hill School get all A's or A's and B's, and
Right.
lots of kids who apply to the Hill School have pretty good testing. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, if we were just trying to go metric based, I don't even know how we would make those decisions. It would be such a like gray area. It would be difficult. We don't have 100 kids who get like bad grades. So
Right.
it doesn't even it's we have to get beyond that. It's what's on the teacher recommendations, what happens in the interview. Like I ask a kid all the time, like, yeah, what kind of grades you get? And a kid inevitably, I got good grades, A's
Right.
and B's. I'm like, okay, do you work hard for those grades?
Right.
That catches them off guard, right? Then I'm like, oh, okay, well, and then I have to kind of tell them, like, what does hard work mean to you? What does that look like that? We're trying to tease out that fit piece. So while yes, the selectivity rate, or listen, I can throw a bunch of stats at you that anybody's school can, and that can twist and turn. I'm like, let's say like BU said they got 70,000 applications this year at the college level. Like, okay, great, but like what? Like, what does that
Right.
even mean? How do you even fathom that? Families also have to understand that while we look like a college and are expensive as a college, we don't have 70,000 applications. It is a much smaller, somewhere on the order of maybe 1% of eligible high school age kids ever even look at boarding school,
Yeah.
right?
I've
Think
heard
about that.
2% globally is the maximum number I've ever heard.
That's not, so it's a smaller pool. Schools need kids who do stuff. You got to fill programs. You got to find the good kid factor. Again, we don't even lead, like, so when we travel with the 10 school group, we do national, international travel. We actually don't even really talk. We try not to be sort of like, oh, look at us, we're that's not how it works. It's the accessibility. And not from a financial perspective. It's like, yes, you can find success here, right? The families who have never done anything, don't know about boarding school, you can exist and thrive if that fit is right. And sure, the admission process is about finding what's right, not about who's not good enough. So and then it goes to working, in a case where a family who's with you, you're going to understand that dynamic and give them options. We try to do a little bit of that counselor piece, right? If I work with a family and they say, oh, we're only going to look at Hill. Okay, that's great. It makes me feel really good. It helps me on the yield.
Right.
But like, if I know that kid might maybe benefit from casting a wider net, I can try to talk to that family in the 7 minutes I have them, and sort of like, but they think that little Susie or
So
Johnny's
you
like,
just tell them to
how
call
could that
me.
school not take my kid? Like, well, I give you some reasons. We'll see. But yes, that part that is part of it. And then maybe that's an advantage as a coach, that I do this job first, I do that job second.
Yeah.
and they bleed into each other, and I can message that appropriately. But as coaches and as a school, we measure that athletes or artists or performers, anybody in our afternoon program who is supported by a program leader, does have a traditionally higher percentage chance of being accepted. That is a fact. And I'm okay to say that. And that's why kids and families want to engage with people who would be important to their child while they're on the campus, right? Figure
Yeah.
that person out because they can back channel and advocate into the admission process to get past the grades, to get past the testing. And now you say, okay, what's this kid going to do on our campus? How are they going to impact Hill or any other school? I'm pretty sure most schools are having those conversations.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing too, I always tell parents between, the beyond the hockey recruiting piece, which doesn't is unlike college at all. From an
Yep.
admission standpoint, I always tell families too, like broadly, the biggest difference, which I think sometimes people forget, and I forget this about my own kids sometimes, but is that like colleges are dealing with adults. Like those are adults.
Yep.
And like the process and what they're looking for in terms of like how you're determining those decisions about adult is really different than what boarding schools are making decisions about adolescents, kids. And so for me, I always say, like, I think what schools, and I do think Hill does this really well, is they're trying to make a determination about the likelihood of the student being able to find success there,
Yep.
right? And for some kids, it's really easy to say, like, well, in all likelihood, they're going to be successful here because they've always been successful. Like
Mm-hmm.
they've had success everywhere else they've been academically. Like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't they have success here? But there are some kids, and I've worked in some selective boarding school offices too, where you're looking at the student and going, hey, like he or she may not be finding that kind of success because of the environment they're in or whatever the situation is. And I think they can find it here.
Yep.
And that's where I do think there is a difference. I think Hill thinks of does their admissions in that way where it's not sort of this rubric of like these are where we're going to go and like kids, once we get kids who are above these standards, then within that group, we're going to decide who we're going to admit.
Yep.
For me, it's always felt a little bit different of that approach for you guys of like, do we think this student can be successful at Hill? And you know, there's there's certainly some consistency in what that looks like, but I also think that allows there's a conversation about that doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to look the same.
Yep. And it's the advantage of a smaller process relative
Right.
to college, right? Where they're dealing with such crazy volume. And we're meeting every single kid. We don't use, like, for example, we don't use interview services at all. We are interfacing as an office with each kid, sometimes virtually like this, in person's even better when we travel. It's important to us. There's a term that the head that I told you I went to school under and then who hired me, David Darty, kind of legendary, saw the school through coeducation and really is certainly on our Mount Rushmore here. He used the term, he called it Hillness, right? There's this idea that like there is a feeling on our campus and it can be, it's sort of hard to describe, but we are looking for that. And we are looking for kids to use another one of his terms. It became kind of like cliche towards the end of his time, but he's, kids who can hear from us, hey, we love you, but now eat your spinach.
Right.
like
Yep.
you got to be able to take both those things. And that's the type of school, like we sit as an office and we're very fortunate. I'm 19 years going into, and I'm only the third longest tenured person in this office.
Wow.
This is an incredible spot where we've had longevity. None of us teach, but we all work in dorms. We all coach teams. We've been very, very fortunate because that, like, we know we're shaping the culture of the school, at least on the front end, right? Bringing those kids in and then letting them thrive. And to think that it has to all look one way or the other. And I think that is an appeal. I think when families get here and kids get here, they realize, okay, this isn't a bunch of those straight A, sharp elbow, got to get a 4.5 to beat your 4.4. Like, that's just not this place. I use a hockey analogy sometimes. Families, I say, like, there's a lot more like second line, like 200-foot centermen on this campus than there are prima donna 50 goal scoring left wings. Like,
Yeah.
that's the vibe. That's the type of kid. And we talk about that in our admission committees because of the recommendations and because like those perspectives beyond the grades and the measurables. We're fortunate in that respect, and it's a pretty cool part of what we do.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I think it's a great place.
I appreciate it.
I've eaten enough of your time here, I think.
No, man, it's
Is there anything I missed? Did we miss anything?
you
Didn't
know
solve
I,
any of the world problems, but
no, this has been awesome. I appreciate the time. Our relationship and the way it's grown has just been amazing. And kids aside, right, just being able to bounce ideas off each other. And I was thinking about one thing while we're talking. It
sure.
was back to one of those early questions about what's changed. And I don't know if this has actually changed, but I find it so funny sometimes for families. They they literally say something like, "Well, we want to play Division 1 somehow."
Right.
Division 1 men's hockey has become, and maybe women's. I'm not on that side of the recruiting as much, but like somehow like Division 1 men's hockey has become like the tried and true goal. Like, and the
Yeah.
kid might think pro, but they won't say it out loud. They'll say Division 1 hockey out loud like it's like no big deal, right? Like they'll list where they want to go and what they want to do. They'll write that stuff down like they're signing up for CYO. They'll talk about Division 3 like it's like, wow, Division 1 doesn't work out. I'll go Division 3. But I always say, like, okay, so Division 1, okay, little kid, and sometimes it's a little guy, and I'm not trying to like dunk on him or nothing, but or even their family, I'll say, well, do you think your kid can play pro? No, God, oh my God,
Right. Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
if they get lucky enough. I'm like, well, just so you know, the percentage of going from one to the others is probably a little higher than you think, right? If you're
Yeah.
playing even nowadays, ACHA and club hockey is producing players who can go and receive a paycheck for playing hockey. That's the
Yeah, for
definition of
sure.
pro. You can play club and go see the world in Europe. You can certainly do that from the Division 3 level, pro tryouts, plenty of guys. But for somehow there seems to be a disconnect. And it goes back to that definition conversation we were having, where it's like, just want families to sort of, you know, take care of your kid, put them in spots. And if it's club hockey because your local school district is awesome and they get everything they want in your town and the team is great and the coach is great, fine. Boarding school might not be for them. Just continue to develop their kid without thinking about what this end game is. And the idea that Division 1 hockey, which recently became less attainable for the average hockey player, given the influx of where players are coming from, to let that happen if it's going to be there, and understand just how high a level those next ones are. If you leave Hill, and I tell players this, if you leave Hill and you play beyond Hill in an organized non-men's league fashion, you're going to be
You're doing
pretty
well.
happy. You're probably not going to worry about the crest on your sweater. You're not going to
Yep.
worry if it says NCAA 1 or 3 or ACHA or anything else. We've had plenty of kids play at all those levels, and I don't think any of them walk around the way on the back end of it, as if to say, geez, look at what I accomplished, right? Like you win a championship at 1, you're walking with those guys or those teammates forever. And it's really just trying to remove that pressure from kids. And it just strikes me sometimes,
Well, I
dealing with
think,
things in that world.
and for whatever reason, like it's because kids don't see it as much, right? Like they don't see how good Division 3 college hockey is, or even
Yeah.
now club hockey. And so I remember when I was coaching at Berkshire, so this is going on a while ago, like, we, one of those, like, we're playing in some tournaments and we're going to practicing at a Division 3 school.
Mm-hmm.
We're walking into the rink and one of the players was like, hey coach, how do you think we would do against this team? I'm like, I mean, we would get murdered. Like, what? I don't
Yeah.
know what world you're living in. Like,
Yeah.
these guys would beat us 20-0. Like, don't worry about it. Like, they're way better than we are. So,
Yeah.
like,
Yep. Yep. And it's so hard, isn't it, too? Like I always feel like, we as boarding school people, coaches, our job is not just to get a kid from like bantam to midget. Like
right,
that's not, it's not just like, hey, patch on the button, good luck and go get them, right? We're trying to help kids. So there's that idea of like reality equaling sometimes what can be seen or heard as negativity or limiting, when we are just really trying to give kids and families the best advice we can. And so oftentimes the market's going to give them the answer anyway, right? Like some coach who
right.
says yes, you can play here, is giving you the answer. And if that voice doesn't occur, you got to try to spread that kind of net. And it's fascinating. We used to do the same thing. We'd go play South Kent before they had taken on the selects name. We would play South Kent for a couple of years at West Point. It was a decent kind of neutral site,
Yeah.
and we would go like on a Wednesday afternoon. And Army, who at the time wasn't having the success they are now, they were a much lower ranked Division I program, and our kids would sit in the stands, and Matt Mulhern and I, we would sit, and
Right.
Justin, we would sit a row or two behind, and you could just see these guys, maybe a nugget,
Yeah.
and
No
we'd
idea.
watch and saying, yeah, I could step out there and do that. And Matt and I are sitting in the back, being like, these dudes would break you in half. Like it would
Right.
not even be. Meanwhile, we asked the kids, we said, hey, count how many guys are out there, by the way.
Right.
You're talking about competing for a job every day. You're talking about, keeping that job once you have it, much more of that professional lifestyle. And I hope boarding school can avoid some of that sort of early professionalization, not even specialization, that professionalization where we're asking these kids to be assets. Like that's a tough world. And there's this kind of tweener U16, U18 junior life where you are seeing that. It's a little bit more cutthroat, and kids are moving, and healthy scratches, and moving between lineups. And man, that is, and again, for somebody who lived it and was a healthy scratch, and like I know what that means, and got traded, I try to tell the kids, like, there's a lot of cool sides of playing at the next level, but there's so much more to it. The idea of being a Division I hockey player is actually much more different than actually being one. And but to say that in a kind, caring, again, I love you, but now here's your spinach. Like, I want you to do everything, kid, but just understand, here's what might the reality be. Because we see the students and players more on a boarding school campus, we probably have the ability to have that conversation with them, but to do it in a way that comes from just a place of wanting the best for them is always what I think we try to do. But man, it's different, because I don't think you and I could relate to
No,
it,
no, and I
right?
think
Like, it's a different landscape.
I talked to Tim Donkus about this last time, and I'm talking to Kevin Zepiel, and I have Ryan Shannon, and you mentioned like
Yeah.
both Ryan and Matt Mulhern, myself included. What I find really interesting is like for a number of people I know who had the prep or boarding school experience, then had opportunities to play at high levels, right? Like Division I college, like Ryan Shannon, like won a Stanley Cup, right?
Yeah.
Like for
Yeah.
those people like us, I think the idea of ultimately what drew us back, and that's the first question I asked you, was like what drew me back into boarding schools. I think what drew you back, what drew all of these people, it was not this idea of like, it wasn't about the hockey, right? It was
No.
about what
No.
this experience is, and ultimately, like, for me, obviously, like, transformative, right? Like it's been my whole life since. So
Yeah.
like that's the part to me that I think, you know, it's the explaining that value proposition is hard, but it's
Super hard.
real, right? Like for
Yep.
sure it's real.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's challenging, no doubt, my friend. It's what we do. It's the lot we've chosen. We're working, and we run into great people, and the network of it all. For me, getting back into coaching at the varsity level, last year, and reconnecting with friends and coaches, and that camaraderie, and so many of them. Again, you can't do it. We ain't getting rich. It's not about that side of
Right.
it in our world. It is all the other reasons, and ultimately it's a great path we try to introduce to families, give kids great experiences while they're here, and in some ways anything beyond that becomes bonus, and becomes, hey, awesome. But the first thing I'm talking to kids when they come back about is typically not where they went to college, or where they played. It's who they are, it's what they're up to, and I think that's what draws people back. I come here because I went to Harvard after Hill. I came back because I loved my time here, and that's what we want. We want more kids and families who hopefully value that.